It was one of those deceptively calm mornings in Willow Creek, Texas, the kind that made you believe, just for a moment, that life was steady, safe, and simple. The sun sat low in the sky, golden and warm, casting soft light across the quiet cul-de-sac. Barefoot on the lawn, Ethan Reynolds stood holding a garden hose, watching the stream arc across his wife's flower bed. The air was thick with the scent of cut grass and blooming jasmine, and then he heard a dull, offbeat thud behind him. Not loud, just wrong. He turned fast. Mira, his wife, was halfway down the porch steps, her body twisted sideways. One hand clawed the wooden railing, the other pressed to her chest. Her mouth moved, but the sound barely came out, a shallow gasp, more breath than voice. Mira! Ethan dropped the hose and ran. He hit his knees beside her, already fumbling for his phone. Her skin had gone pale, waxy. Her eyes unfocused, pupils huge. He thought she was trying to say his name. He punched in 911, voice cracking. My wife's having a heart attack. Please. Please hurry. The dispatcher stayed calm. Help is on the way. Stay with her. The moment he hung up, Ethan bolted to the driveway, moved the garbage bins, threw open the side gate, yanked lawn chairs out of the path, anything to clear the way. Then he sprinted back, dropped down beside Mira, whispering, Stay with me. They're coming. Hold on. The siren wailed in the distancia, a sound Ethan would forever associate with salvation. But sometimes hope lies. The ambulance pulled up, lights flashing red on the white paint. Two paramedics jumped out, bags slung over shoulders, and then froze. One knelt beside the front tire. The other cursed under his breath. Ethan ran over. What's going on? Sir, the EMT said. Someone slashed the tire. What? He blinked, and then saw it. The paramedic reached out and pulled something from the Tyria kitchen knife. Slick with dew. Buried to the hilt. Ethan felt the ground tilt beneath him. Who would do that? He asked, voice cracking. The EMT already had his radio out. Dispatch, this is Unit 14. We've got a disabled rig, critical cardiac patient, request immediate backup. Took 25 minutes. 25 minutes of Ethan kneeling beside Mira, her lips blue, her body limp, her breath shallow and spaced like each one was a negotiation with death. When the second ambulance finally pulled away with her inside, Ethan stood in the driveway, numb and shaking. He walked into the garage and checked the security camera feed, not even knowing what he hoped to find. And there it was. Eloise Morgan, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Robe, coffee mug, house slippers. She walked up to the ambulance, looked both ways, then bent down, stabbed the tire, and walked back home sipping coffee like she'd just checked the mail. No hesitation. No urgency. No care. Ethan watched the footage again and again. The motion was smooth, practiced, cold. This wasn't hate. It was something colder, something calculated. Their feud had started months ago, like most neighborhood clashes do. A letter about their trash can be invisible from the street. A citation for Ethan's hand-painted house numbers. A $50 fine for Mira hanging laundry outside. Visual pollution, Eloise called it. But this was criminal. This was a woman who looked at an ambulance and saw a violation instead of a dying human being. Ethan didn't remember crossing the street. One second he was watching the footage, the next he was on Eloise's porch. She sat in her rocking chair, robe belted, mug in hand. What the hell is wrong with you? He shouted. She barely looked at him. They were parked in a fire lane, she said, tone flat. That's against HOA regulations. Page 12, Section 4.2. My wife is dying, you psychopath. Not my responsibility, she replied and took a sip. 3 words. 3 nails driven into his skull. Ethan stumbled back across the street, back to Mira, back to the medics trying in vain to stabilize her. He whispered to her, begged her to hold on. When the second unit arrived, Mira flatlined en route to the hospital. For 46 seconds, her heart stopped. They brought her back. But she wasn't the same. Neither was Ethan. At the hospital, under harsh lights, surrounded by antiseptic and beeping monitors, he made a choice. He wouldn't let this go. By 8 a.m. he was at the police station with everything: security footage, EMT statements, the ER intake forms. He underlined one sentence in red ink. Delay in care due to damaged emergency transport. The off-a-weary man in his 40s glanced through it all. If she didn't know it was a medical emergency, this'll be tricky, he said. Ethan stared. It was an ambulance. Lights, sirens, medics. She might claim she thought it was abandoned. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. It was in my driveway. The officer nodded slowly, took some notes. Promised to follow up. Ethan knew what that meant. Back home, Eloise was setting up for a garage sale. Humming. Ethan stood behind the hedge and listened as she explained herself to a neighbor. Technically, they weren't authorized to park there. I was protecting property rights. The neighbor nodded. Others avoided his eyes. Something snapped inside Ethan. He started knocking on doors. He showed neighbors the footage, the reports, the timestamps, the call logs. Some looked away. Some shrugged. But some started to talk. An ex-Navy vet down the street said she once threatened to fine my 8-year-old for leaving his bike in the driveway. Another. She reported us for hanging a wreath in October. Said it was unseasonal. Another. She called the police on my brother for parking during Thanksgiving. We were unloading groceries. The whispers turned to stories. Stories to signatures. Ethan wrote up a petition, remove Eloise Morgan from HOA leadership for community safety. He gathered 60 names in 3 days. Then he emailed the local news station. My wife nearly died during a heart attack. Our HOA president slashed the ambulance tire. Here's the proof. 2 hours later, Channel 9 called him back. The segment aired Wednesday night. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Footage blurred for privacy. EMT testimony. A voiceover. A headline. HOA president sabotages ambulance in alleged power abuse. It exploded online. Reddit. TikTok. Facebook. Twitter. People were furious. Within 48 hours, Ambulance Karen was trending. Eloise's face blurred or not is all over the internet. People dug up HOA fines she'd issued, compiled complaints, posted documents. This wasn't her first power trip, just the first one recorded. Eloise tried to hide behind a lawyer. Tried to act like nothing had changed. But it had. The DA's office received over 700 complaints. And then one morning, as Ethan stood watering his front garden almost like a ritual now, watched a squad car pull up to Eloise's house. 2 officers. Calm. Professional. Ma'am, you're under arrest for obstruction of emergency services and reckless endangerment. She didn't protest. Didn't yell. She was led down her steps in cuffs. Past the flowers she'd once measured for height compliance. Past the mailbox she'd fined someone for touching. Past the neighbor now watching in silence. The courtroom was small. No cameras. Just benches. Paper. Quiet. Eloise sat at the defense table, expression blank, dressed like she was at a board meeting, not a criminal trial. The judge wasn't buying it. There is video evidence of the defendant disabling an emergency vehicle, he said, cutting off her lawyer. Motion to dismiss denied. The footage played. There were no gasps. Just stillness. Then testimonies. Ethan on the stand, voice cracking. I didn't think I'd ever watch my wife die on our porch. The EMTs. We lost time. We lost 46 seconds. She flatlined. And then Mira on video. Pale. Frail. I could have died because someone cared more about rules than my life. The jury took less than 2 hours. Guilty. No remorse. No emotion. Eloise just sat there. Her sentence was scheduled for June. But her downfall had already begun. The HOA board voted her out the next day. Her house sat unsold for months. No one wanted it. Too infamous. The neighbors stopped waving. Her name wasn't spoken out of fear, but choice. Ethan didn't celebrate. He just brought Mira home. Slowly. Gently. They planted marigolds and lavender where the ambulance had once been parked. They grew fierce like they had something to prove. And the neighborhood changed. The new HOA board was diverse, fair, and kind. Meetings felt like conversations, not courtrooms. Eloise's reign ended quietly. But the memory remained. One morning, as Ethan and Mira strolled to the mailbox, hand in hand, he paused at a yard near the corner. A wooden sign stood by the walkway. 6 words. Human life is not an inconvenience. He squeezed Myra's hand. And for once he felt peace. Not revenge. Just release.